I'm glad that Director Gillespie is here. She'll come close to the microphone when questions arise that she might need to answer. As you know, yesterday we received the D.C. Court ruling from Judge Boasberg. The ruling came yesterday. I reviewed it last night. Moments ago, I had a conversation with Deputy Secretary Hargan of the DHS in Washington, as well as his general counsel and other attorneys who have been involved in this case. We've communicated with the Attorney General's office in Arkansas as well, and I just met with the Senate and House leadership on this. As you know, Arkansas has been on the leading edge of a work requirement for those on expanded Medicaid. We have been on the leading edge, and we were the first state to implement this waiver. And since we implemented the waiver, many states have followed this lead and have requested waivers, and other waivers are in the pipeline. And whenever you lead on a particular issue, particularly nationally, you have to overcome some obstacles. And we received an obstacle yesterday in the court's decision. The judge's ruling made a couple of points that should be emphasized today. First of all, Judge Boasberg did not strike down the work requirement based upon the reporting elements that has created significant controversy here in Arkansas and media attention over the last 6 months. He did not strike it down based upon any of the reporting requirements. He did not reach that question because he had a fundamental disagreement with the work requirement in and of itself. His view is that Medicaid is an entitlement program, and you cannot place additional requirements that may lead to a loss of coverage. That is his fundamental belief that goes through his previous opinion as well as this opinion. I contend that Judge Boasberg is wrong, and I'm urging the Department of Justice and Secretary Azar to appeal the ruling and to seek an expedited appeal of the district court's decision. And again, I communicated that in the conversation we had moments ago. Judge Boasberg also pointed out that this could be a pause. He used that language in his opinion. In other words, he recognizes the likelihood of an appeal and that this could be changed, and so he referred that this could be a pause. I hope he is correct on that point, but it is important to emphasize today that I remain fully committed to a work requirement, and we are in this for the long haul because we believe it is the right policy for Arkansans who want to work and need more training and more opportunity. I should add that President Trump and his administration remains committed as well to this work requirement. And I expect that additional work requirements be issued in terms of waivers from the Secretary's office in the near future. This work requirement applies to those who receive a public benefit and who are able-bodied, so they will have the best opportunity to work and receive training and to get employment. Since last June, over 12,000 Arkansans have been referred to the Department of Workforce Services as a result of the work requirement and have found employment, over 12,000 Arkansans. And if you go back on the history of the entire expanded Medicaid, we had an estimate back in 2013 when the program went into place that there would be 250,000 Arkansans covered by the expanded Medicaid, the private option at that time. Since then, it reached a high of 330,000. It is currently at 235,000, the most recent numbers. That means from the high point of 330,000, approximately 95,000 have moved off of Arkansas Works. But only 18,000 of those 95,000 lost coverage because of a failure to comply with the work requirement or the reporting requirements. Of those 18,000 that lost coverage, less than 2,000 have re-enrolled since they've had that opportunity in January. Again, it could be because they have found employment in a booming economy in which employers are seeking workers. They've had the training that they need. But that means that 77,000 have moved off the rolls because of a job and an income since this has been in place. Of those subject to the work requirement, 88% have been in compliance. Now, notwithstanding this success, we have the judge's ruling from yesterday, and we have to make adjustments based upon the judge's ruling. And first of all, that means that the waiver amendment for the work requirement with the consequences has been vacated. And so the online portal has been shut down, and no one will lose coverage from this point forward as a result of any failure to comply or failure to report. Secondly, if you remember, part of the waiver was the retroactive coverage was reduced to 30 days. That will be extended back to 90 days under the court's ruling. But we should remember that the original Arkansas Works waiver remains in place. It is now in place, and that was under the work referral provisions, which requires DHS to refer over to DWS any able-bodied Medicaid recipient under the Arkansas Works program. So those work referrals will continue, and training and outreach will proceed. Now, the question that is on many people's minds is, well, what will happen now to the DHS appropriation? In my view, the DHS appropriation should not be in jeopardy. It's passed through the Senate. Now we have the judge's decision, but if anything, it reinforces the need to continue to pursue this work requirement and the appeal, and the best opportunity to accomplish that is to fund Arkansas Works and the DHS appropriation. If we want to continue the fight for a work requirement, the best course is to appeal, to seek the expedited appeal, and if we take Arkansas Works out of the DHS appropriation, then we're in essence giving up on the fight and saying we no longer need a work requirement, we no longer want to fight for that, and it'll moot out any appeal. And so it's very important that the DHS appropriation supporting the Arkansas Works, continuing to fight for the work requirement that we have put into place, will be able to continue. And if we give up on this, then we will give up on the opportunity to lead nationally on this important program that gives Arkansans a better opportunity for training, for access to the marketplace, and the jobs that they want, and they've proven that they are capable of handling. And so with that, that's an update on this. I want to ask the Senate Pro Tem and the Speaker if they have any comments.
Well, I think we're in agreement that the impact of the judge's decision is not going to derail the legislative session. We had this discussion in the Senate yesterday. There is strong support for the work requirement, and allowing a district judge to change the policy affecting 250,000 Arkansans without an opportunity to appeal is not something the Senate was willing to do. So, as the governor said, we've passed the appropriation through the Senate. We heard testimony from DHS that the appropriation that was passed is sufficient to deal with or without the work requirement. So we are very satisfied with the work of the Senate, and we're very pleased that we're going to continue the efforts to appeal the decision and to reinstate the work requirement so that, again, we continue to move people into opportunities for work.
Well, I'd just like to echo the governor's comments that at this point, I see no reason to change how we would proceed with the appropriation in the House. I anticipate that that appropriation will be brought up tomorrow, and that we'll take a vote at that time. As with anything else, those things are always subject to change, but at this point, that's what we intend to do. I believe that, of course, as an attorney, I'm used to evaluating and looking at the effects of court decisions, and I think we all understand that this is an initial decision here that there are very likely to be appeals. We heard testimony in joint budget the other day that the appropriation was sufficient with or without the work requirement. And so at this point, I think we will proceed forward in the House, and I'm still very optimistic that we'll be able to chin the bar and be able to get the votes that we need to pass that appropriation, and then look forward to wrapping up the session in the next couple of weeks.
Any questions?
Mr. Speaker, the governor said that the budget should, or the appropriation should not be in jeopardy in this opinion. Is it, in your opinion, jeopardy?
At this point, I don't believe it's in jeopardy, but as with anything else around here, anytime you have a piece of legislation that garners this much attention, and you have a decision that just came down late yesterday afternoon, fairly lengthy, I think it was 33 pages, and something that has been talked about in some form or fashion over the past 6 years, there's always going to be a lot of attention that's brought to it. I think that this is just another piece of information that the membership will have to weigh as to how they feel about voting on the appropriation. At this point, I've not heard the type of pushback that would lead me to believe that it is in jeopardy. But as I said, when it came to any of the other big pieces of legislation that we took up, we're going to continue to work to discuss the matter with members, give them the opportunity to ask their questions, to evaluate the opinion itself. But I still remain very optimistic. But we're continuing to count votes as we would with anything else.
Senator Hendren, are you concerned? You said on the Senate floor yesterday that the appropriation process wasn't a place to have that debate on the policy. Are you concerned that you mentioned the word derail? Are you concerned that they could derail that process, the appropriation process?
Well, as the Speaker said, I don't think so. Again, people were full aware. I want to disclose the judge did not call me first because we voted 3 or 4 minutes, I think, before the decision came out. But we were fully aware that that decision would be coming out in the next day or two. And members knew that this was a very likely possibility. But they also understood that we have a responsibility to pass a budget. And to allow, again, one court decision stop us from fulfilling that responsibility, I don't think that's going to change.
Governor, when you talked to the officials with HHS, did they indicate whether they are actually going to be?
Well, they have to do a little more consultation before they can make the final decision. There's a lot of strategy involved in it as to whether you seek a stay, whether you seek an expedited appeal. Can Kentucky join in this? And obviously, with the Department of Justice engaged, they've got a little bit more work to do. But I expect this to move quickly. I was very encouraged by it, and that they want to take an aggressive approach on it. And again, I can't say what they will do, but I urge them, from Arkansas's standpoint, to expedite the appeal, to seek an expedition of the appeal, and also in the course of that, we need to hopefully get Arkansas's work requirement back on track, because you're disrupting the status quo. And I think that's what made Judge Boasberg somewhat nervous and said maybe this is a pause. But he weighed that very carefully. Now, he came down on what I think is the wrong side of that. But it's a great disruption of the status quo that represents a significant investment by Arkansas, and that has achieved what I believe is significant success in the program. So I expect them to hopefully pursue that expedited appeal.
They don't appeal it, will Arkansas appeal it?
We don't have the independent standing. We're an intervener in that case.
As to the reporting issue that you brought up about the judge's decision or opinion being focused more on the nature of Medicaid and entitlement rather than the reporting in Arkansas program itself, he did mention the reporting in Arkansas, and in particular, he pointed out that only around 12% of people who were subject to the requirements actually reported qualifying activity. In other words, the overwhelming majority of people who have been approved of meeting the work requirement were automatically is there an issue there, I mean, regardless of what happens in the future with reporting and how DHS is having people report their work hours?
Well, I mean, first of all, that's the interesting thing about statistics. He chose to cite what he wished to cite. But as I said, 88% of those subject to the work requirement have maintained and fulfilled that requirement. Now, you're right, some of them are automatically complying, and it's a little bit different for those who have to take the initiative to comply. But that's what we've invested enormous resources just the other day with the Central Arkansas Library System. But the fact is, he talked about it, but he did not base his decision on that or reach an opinion on that. He did not go there because he has a fundamental disagreement with anything that would have a consequence for someone who is on Medicaid that could lead to a loss in coverage. And so I think what you will see that the Court of Appeals might have a different view of that. The Supreme Court might have a different view of that, but we'll see. But also, it allows us to proceed with, I think we're fortunate that we had the first waiver for the work referral. And now that we've had more training or more awareness and a lot of public dialogue about it, I think you'll find that there will be a greater compliance with the voluntary work referral than there was previously because of the education that we've gone through. So we'll continue to watch that.
Governor, last year when you talked about the work requirement being necessary to get the votes to keep Arkansas works, I guess without it in place right now or with the pause on it, how much more difficult of a push is it going to be to get to 75?
Well, I mean, first of all, 75, 3/4 is difficult under any circumstances. You had a vote in the House the other day that a number of members opposed appropriation bills because they wanted separate legislation to pass through. So there's a lot of dynamics. It's always difficult and challenging. But we have...
Shop today and save big store-wide on all living, dining, and bedroom. Plus, 5 years, no interest. But hurry, the Super 7-Day sell-off at Furniture Row ends Thursday.
My feet hurt so bad in the morning, I couldn't even put my feet on the floor. So I had to start engineering my own arch support. So I got that, then I put this in there, this one. Finally, before I added another one of these in, I went to Good Feet, and they gave me this. So I built all this together to engineer a solution to my pain. And if I'd have just gone to Good Feet, I'd have been better off in the first place.
Good Feet Arch Supports, engineered for pain relief, personally fitted for you.
Looking for great sleep at a great price? Denver Mattress has you covered. During the Super 7-Day sell-off, save up to 70% on select Green Choice and Aspen models, plus 5 years no interest. Denver